I think if we're ready, I'm just going to say hello. Good evening. I'm Kathy Kennedy. I'm the Senior Outreach Manager for the Peconic Land Trust. And I want to thank you again for joining us tonight. We're grateful that you're spending some time with us this evening to learn about Long Island bats. On a housekeeping note, everyone is muted. You can put your questions in the Q&A, which is the button at the bottom of your screen, and we will try to get to those questions at the end of the program. This program is one of many that we've hosted on Zoom, and I'm hoping that you've seen a few of those. If you haven't, they are available on our blog, so you can always check out our website. We've done things like the importance of native plants in our landscape, an overview of wildlife returning to Long Island, which we did in partnership with Seatuck earlier this year. Conversations with local farmers, chefs, and winemakers, to food insecurity. So we try to cover a lot of bases, a lot of subjects, and have something for everyone throughout the year. Tonight, we're excited to partner with Seatuck Environmental Association. Seatuck is dedicated to conserving Long Island wildlife and the environment, and pursues its mission by advocating for wildlife and advancing conservation projects, engaging community scientists in wildlife research, and offering high-quality environmental education opportunities for Long Islanders of all ages. Our two presenters, as well as our moderator, all share a passion for the natural environment, and we'll be telling you more about the current research on Long Island's bats. In addition, you're going to hear about Batmap Long Island, which is a citizen science project that you can get involved with and help make a difference on Long Island. Before we get started, just a little bit about the Peconic Land Trust. Trust was founded in 1983 with a mission to conserve Long Island's working farms, natural lands, and heritage. And with your help, along with the help of a lot of other people, foundations, governments, we've protected over 13,000 acres of farmland and natural lands on Long Island. It includes wetlands and shorelines and meadows, places for wildlife habitat, and protecting our drinking water as well. 6,000 of those acres are protecting farmland for, for local food and other agricultural products. Working farms are an important piece of our mission, and protecting the land and then helping farmers have access to land to grow food for you is really important for us. So all of this we do and more, and we're able to do that because of supporters like you. So thank you. For today's panel, I am pleased to introduce you to Emily Hall, Conservation Policy Advocate at Seatuck, and Katie Gorman, a graduate student at Virginia Tech who's conducting scientific research on the bat population on Long Island. Our moderator for tonight's program is Arielle Santos, who's a Wildlife Conservation Policy Program Coordinator at Seatuck. Arielle holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Marine Biology from the University of Rhode Island. Her work at Seatuck Environmental Association ranges from community science project management, GIS mapping, half shells for habitats, volunteer coordinator, and a lot more. So before I turn the program over to Arielle and our panelists, a final reminder on the Q&A. Just use the button at the bottom of the screen to pose your question, and we will try to get to those questions at the end of the program. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Arielle and to our panelists, and thank you very much.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Kathy, for that wonderful introduction. On behalf of Seatuck Environmental Association, I would like to welcome you all to Bats of Long Island. Tonight, we are joined by two wonderful presenters who's going to teach us about bats on Long Island, some of the threats that they face, and what we can do to help conservationists and scientists learn more about them. As Kathy mentioned, my name is Arielle Santos, and I will be the moderator for tonight's program. I'm very excited to be here and to learn alongside you all. We welcome and encourage you to jot down any questions that you may have for the presenters and enter those into the Q&A box. But with that, I'd like to now introduce our first speaker, Emily Hall. So Emily, whenever you're ready, you can take it away.
Great, thank you so much, Arielle and Kathy. I am just gonna take a moment to share my screen. Okay. Can everyone see that okay?
Looks good.
Good, perfect. All right. So we're really excited again to partner with the Peconic Land Trust on this talk. it's just really important and valuable work that we do. And I think kind of unknown work on Long Island to preserve our local bat population. So I'll just be giving a little bit of an overview of Long Island bats and Batmap Long Island. Okay. So to get started, I just kind of wanted to give a little overview of Seatuck Environmental Association and what we do, if you're not familiar with us. So we are a 501c3 nonprofit located in Islip, New York. However, we do work across Long Island, and we do work kind of on two sides of a coin. One side is we work on wildlife conservation, and that's through things like habitat restoration, community science surveys, environmental policy, land protection, and a lot more. And then on the other side of the coin, we do a lot of nature-based education programs. So everything like public programming like this, to also our Little Peepers, fully outdoor forest preschool program, other after-school programs, native gardens in schools, teacher trainings, and more. And if you're interested in learning about anything else, you could just head to our website, seatuck.org. Okay. So a little overview of the different species of bats that we have on Long Island. So these are a series of kind of the known bats. So the bats we have seen in the past or we've seen currently. And I think a lot of people might be surprised that we actually do have so many species and it's not just kind of one or two. So these include, I'll try to get a laser pointer out so you can see, the little brown bat, the northern long-eared bat, the eastern red bat, the big brown bat, the tricolored bat, the silver-haired bat, and the hoary bat. And each of these different bats uses the landscape in different ways. They use their habitat in different ways, so they kind of almost even perform different functions on the ecosystem. So each of them are very important. Some of the ones that are more popular on Long Island that you might see more are big brown and eastern red bats. So if you are seeing a bat kind of around you, you might see those more frequently. Some of the more rare ones include the little brown and tricolored bats. And Katie will talk a little bit more about the northern long-eared bats, which are actually threatened nationally and in New York State. And I'll get to why in a little bit. Okay, so where do bats live? Bats can actually be found in many different types of habitats, including forests, wetlands, cities, and suburbs. They don't necessarily need kind of a perfect landscape to live, but they prefer that type of habitat because they basically are looking for food and insects. In the summer, bats will roost in trees or buildings. So basically they'll roost in those habitats and then move around the landscape at night and hunt for food. In the wintertime, bats will either migrate to a warmer location in the US, or they might hibernate locally, maybe in attics, basements, crawl spaces, culverts. There's not a lot really known about exactly where they hibernate locally, however, because in other locations, they'll hibernate in mines or caves, and we don't really have those on Long Island. So we're kind of guessing that they might use some of these other spaces where basically you need a cool, consistent temperature over the winter months, and that's what they prefer to hibernate in. All right, so why are bats important to our landscape? They provide a host of different ecosystem services. So basically, ecosystem services are the benefits that humans get from the environment or animals. And one of them is insect eating. So bats can eat a tremendous amount of insects. I believe one big brown bat can eat, I think, over 1,200 mosquito-sized bugs in just an hour. So they eat an incredible volume of insects. And like I said, these include things like the pesky mosquitoes that everyone kind of gets annoyed with over the summer, or much more harmful insects that can actually harm local vegetation or agricultural crops. So they're really important in that sense. Additionally, they also are really amazing. Some bats are really amazing pollinators. So they support things like coconut, banana, I think avocados, and agave, which actually produces tequila. So they're really important in that sense as well. Our local bats, however, are not pollinators, but they are insect eaters. So they really perform that important function in the landscape. So what are the conservation threats to bats? First of all, eliminating their habitat. So things like deforestation and development can really cut down on the available space that they might want to roost or hibernate or different things like that. And that's when they'll really be looking for alternative habitats and might not be able to find them really effectively. A second one is disease. Unfortunately, this disease called white nose syndrome has decimated populations of bats across the East Coast and kind of moving nationally. It did originate in New York, we know, and has drastically reduced the populations of bats that we have in New York as well. So basically how this disease works is you can see that it's kind of a fungus that develops on their nose here. You can also see it on their wings as well and extremities. And basically what it does is it kind of irritates them so much, bothers them, that it wakes them up during hibernation, because this fungus can go really well in caves and mines where bats hibernate. So it'll wake them up, they'll get kind of sporadic and confused, and then they'll look to hunt because they're kind of starving. But unfortunately, often when they wake up during hibernation, there are no insects on the landscape because it's in the winter time. And they'll basically, unfortunately, starve to death because there's nothing for them to eat. And like I said, this has been a really harmful disease amongst New York bats. But Long Island might actually act as kind of a little bit of a potential refuge from this disease for a couple different reasons. One, we don't really have caves or mines where it could spread really quickly. And two, if they do get white nose syndrome, because the climate's more moderated here, we may have more insects on the landscape during those winter months, and they would be able to find food. So those are some of the reasons why this can be really harmful. And then lastly, just kind of a negative perception of bats. I think, historically bats have had, a pretty bad rap, kind of just even in pop culture, just kind of as like the evil Halloween type of creatures. But also, more recently as well as kind of transmitters of disease like coronavirus or something like that. So we're just kind of trying to also improve the perception of bats in that, it's not really their fault, if these diseases do get transferred, because often or not, we're the ones, humans, that are entering their habitat and entering their space, and they don't really want to necessarily kind of interact with us as well. It's kind of one of those things like they're more scared of you than we are of them, sort of thing. So how can we help them? There's a couple different things that we can do. So one of them is put up bat houses to act as summer homes. So this just provides them kind of an additional alternative on where to roost in the summer months. Again, kind of preserving local habitat is crucial. So preserving those local habitat that they want to use, that they more frequently use, kind of a diverse landscape, whether it has a stream, a pond, the woodlands. This is really important work as well. And then lastly, just kind of good wildlife safety and good habits overall is good for kind of any wildlife protection in general, but especially for bats. So one, we really encourage people not to handle bats if you see one that's distressed or unfortunately a dead bat. If you do, you're welcome to reach out to us and we could provide you with some rescue contacts or some other resources that would be able to help you. And then also when you just hike or travel, remember to kind of clean your shoes or other belongings before you go to a new place. Because unfortunately, it is often that new pathogens or invasive species will get transferred to new places just merely because a human brought them in on their clothing or on their shoes or something like that. Okay. So what is Batmap Long Island? Batmap Long Island is our community science survey tool where anyone can really go out to their property or landscape and tell us where they're observing bats. So basically you'd go out in the warmer months, so around dusk or dawn, so dusk a little bit after sunset, dawn a little bit before sunrise, and they'll basically come out and be emerging and looking for food. They may emerge from like a wooded area, and they may even fly around a body of water. So like a pond or a stream or a pool, places where insects might be is where bats might be as well. So you can basically just go to seatuck.org to access the survey and download the app. And right now I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to transfer over to our website to show you where you can get this information. Okay. hopefully everyone can see that. All right, so what you can do is you can go to seatuck.org, our website. You can transfer over to the Get Involved tab, and then down to Community Science Projects and Batmap Long Island. Now, if you scroll down, we have some information on Batmap Long Island. It was also created for us by Maria Brown. She's a really amazing bat biologist that works on Long Island. And then we actually have the survey embedded right into the website. So you can use it two different ways. You can use it through the website and just submit your observations that way. Or you can go to the Survey 123 app, and I'll show you how to get there in a second. But I just want to show you some additional resources that we have on here. We have some information on our bat monitoring webinar, some additional information from researchers and local scientists on bat research on Long Island, but it's also, again, shows you how to use the Batmap survey. We also have here the actual survey site map. So each of these red dots are where people have seen bats on Long Island. And this app has really only been launched since maybe like 2020. So it's kind of incredible already. And it shows you like basically the extent of where you can find bats on Long Island, which is pretty much everywhere, which is great. All right, so then I'll show you how to get to the Survey 123 app. I believe. All right, 1 second. Okay, so you can download this app just simply from just from the App Store. You actually don't need an ArcGIS online account. So basically you can just download this, say continue without signing in. And then you can actually just, when you're on our website, we have the full instructions here. So you can download the survey map, scan the QR code or click to the link, which will bring you to an option, either open in browser or open in the Survey 123 Field app. And then it'll populate right there for you. So once you get it on the Survey 123 app, it'll actually stay there. So you don't have to continue going to our website or continually re-download it each time. So it'll always be on your Survey 123 app. So for this survey, we ask you things like your name, the observation date, the time. There's this little tool here where you can tell us where the exact location is. We ask you the county, the street location, zip code of the bat observation. We ask you some of their behavior because that sometimes can tell us a little bit more information about the bat or maybe what type of bat they might be. So are they flying overhead? Are they emerging from trees, emerging from a structure? And then we also have a little link here too. If you find a sick, injured, or deceased bat, you can contact local wildlife rehab centers at the Wildlife Monitoring Network.org. So you can go there as well. All right, we asked you some other things like where do you observe bats at dusk? Where are they flying? How many individuals? Things like that. And then lastly, we also ask you if you'd be willing to provide access to your property for us to come and do further bioacoustic monitoring. So basically this data is really important for you to tell us where you're seeing bats on Long Island, because then we can come to your property. We can put out different tools that will actually listen to the bats, listen to their echolocation and the different sounds that they make. And that can actually more accurately tell us what bats are on your property or near you. And we can identify whether there's a rare or threatened bats and ones that might need more protection. Okay. So that is Batmap Long Island. So I'll stop sharing. And I will hand it over to Katie.
Thank you. I'm sorry I lost internet for a second, but now it should work. And I need to start the show. Can you hear me? Okay, cool. All right, so My name is Kitty Gorman. I'm a graduate research and curatorial assistant at Virginia Tech. And my study area is on Long Island. One of the main things that I'm studying is northern longeared bat and their social dynamics. So northern longeared bats, their Latin name is Myotis septentrionalis. Right now, like Emily was saying, they're threatened under the Endangered Species Act since 2015 because of white nose syndrome, but they're actually being considered for uplisting to endangered right now. So we'll see what happens with that in the next year or so. They are one of the smallest species of bat on Long Island, and I have their measurements here, which are a little weird to think about, but I like to compare it to, they weigh about the size, the same amount as a piece of printer paper. So they're really, really light and really, really small. They're like that big. And so they are different from some of the other species that we have on Long Island because they use high frequency echolocation and they glean insects. So that means the way that they prey, the way that they hunt is they will swoop in and they'll kind of grab insects that are on branches or on the ground or just that are on surfaces rather than insects that are actively flying around. And they are known to whisper. So they, even though we can't hear their calls because it's too high of a frequency, they're actually really loud calls usually. So like some bats, the volume is like the sound of a freight train passing by. They're really, really loud. We just can't hear them. These bats are a little quieter. And then one way that you can kind of tell them apart from other species of bats or other Myotis bats especially is they have this really long, I don't know if you can see my pointer, they have this really long, skinny, pointy tragus, which is like the part of your ear that's right on the inside here. And that is because it's shaped that way because of their echolocation style. So where I do my research is the William Floyd Estate, which is managed by the National Park Service. And it's part of Fire Island National Seashore, but it's a mainland unit right here, kind of to the, I guess, west of the Hamptons. And it's a historic estate house that belonged to William Floyd. And he's one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. And everybody should go there. Apparently it's really good for birding too. So even though Emily talked about this a little bit, I'll talk about it more as it pertains to northern long-eared bats, but they have seasonal patterns where in the fall, they'll kind of all gather around, usually their hibernation sites, and they'll swarm and they'll mate. And then in the winter, these bats usually hibernate in caves and mines, but like Emily was saying, we don't know if they're hibernating locally. We do know in northern Long Island, there are some males that are hibernating in people's houses and basements, but maybe there are some that are hibernating in culverts. And these bats in particular have experienced a 90% decline. I think it's actually 97 or 98% decline since the onset of white nose syndrome. So they have really been decimated by white nose syndrome. In the spring, females will emerge from hibernation first, and they'll go to their maternity colony staging areas and begin the insemination process. So they have delayed fertilization. And then males and non-reproductive females will kind of be solitary, and they'll just kind of go to their summering foraging grounds and hang out by themselves for the summertime. And then in the summer, the females that are reproductive, which is what I'm studying, they give birth to their young and nurse them until the pups are able, the babies are called pups, they're able to fly on their own, which is usually about 3 weeks after birth. And then once that starts happening, the maternity colony breaks up, and then they go back to their hibernation sites and they start mating again. The cycle begins. So what I'm really interested in is the spring and kind of summer social dynamics of these bats. And so they practice what's called fission fusion social dynamics. And that's categorized by the females will come and form a colony together. So for northern long-eared bats, the typical maternity colony size, I think used to be like pre-white nose, over 30 individuals, maybe 30 to 50 individuals. Now post-white nose syndrome, the average colony, maternity colony size is more like 3 or 4 individuals. So on Long Island at the William Floyd Estate, we have a colony that we know is at least 20 individuals large. And we've caught them year after year, and we find them in the same 1 or 2 central node or roost trees, central roosts that the whole colony will share. And then we'll track them to different roosts too. So a fission fusion social dynamic is where the bats come together, and that's the fusion part of it. They have 1 or 2, maybe 3 central node roost trees, and then they'll kind of break apart and they'll go to trees that they just go to as individuals, or maybe they're in it with 2 or 3 other bats. And we know this from when we track a bat to a tree, we'll perform an emergence count and see how many bats come out of that tree. And a lot of times they'll roost with the same, like they might kind of have like one bat that they're particularly close to, and they'll go from tree to tree together, which is really cool. And so throughout the spring and summer, they'll kind of all come together in these central trees, and then they'll go out on their own for 1 or 2 days, and then they'll come back. So they're constantly kind of adjusting, probably because of different thermoregulatory benefits that they get from one roost over another. So what I do when I'm at the William Floyd Estate is I set up mist nets, which it's really difficult to see in this picture, but there's a really fine net in between these 2 poles, and I'll set them over linear landscape features like roads or water features that the bats might be using as kind of like flyways, where they don't have to necessarily be so dependent on their echolocation for flight, but they can use sight a little bit more. Then once I catch them in the nets, I'll take all of their demographic information, like their sex, their reproductive status, some measurements from them, whether or not they're showing signs of white nose syndrome or like wing scarring. And then we will, when we get a northern long-eared bat, we attach a transmitter to them, and then we can follow them around with the transmitter for usually about a week or so until it drops off of them. And we attach it with like a surgical glue, so it's on there, but it's not on there forever. I also do what Emily talked about a little bit. I do some acoustic detection. So this is a little acoustic detector on a tree, and here's the microphone up here. And these microphones only pick up ultrasonic signals from sunset to sunup. And so they're triggered by really high frequency noises, so like high frequency insects or usually just bats. And then I get all the information on an SD card. I put it into some software, and it gives me the calls like this. And I can use Fish and Wildlife approved auto identification software to see what species of bat I have. And then we go through and manually look through and say, okay, this is actually not a northern long-eared bat call. This is probably a big brown call. But northern long-eared bats will call about up here. So we can tell the difference in the where the call is on the scale, and also the shape of the call will tell you what species it is, and the duration. This is kind of the call spread out to show us the shape of the call a little bit better. So you can see it kind of like hooks up at the end here. And so that is a myotis bat with kind of actually turned down at the end here, more like this. And then another project that we're working on in partnership with the DEC in New York is a genetic analysis. So we have tissue samples, which you take wing punches from between the veins so that we don't cause any bleeding or anything like that. We take wing punches from the northern long-eared bats, and we have them from North Carolina, Maryland, DC, Virginia, West Virginia, New York, Pennsylvania, and Massachusetts. And we do an analysis to see how related the bats are to one another. And it turns out right now we're still in the preliminary stages, but it maybe the Massachusetts bats are a little different, and that could be something that signifies maybe they have a genetic resistance to white nose syndrome or something that we could explore further. Like if they're in a population that has been isolated from other northern long-eared bat populations. Maybe they're not going to the same caves to breed and mix in with other populations. And then also we have, this is an example of the social network that we have at the William Floyd Estate, and it's a little weird output. So the purple circles here are bats, and all the green circles are the roost trees. So we can see this bat was going to this roost tree a bunch of times, so it's got a thicker line. This over here is actually a juvenile male bat that we never actually connected to the larger social network, but we assume that he came from it because he was a juvenile. So probably one of these bats gave birth to this juvenile and he flew off. So we still include him in the network. And then this was a female whose transmitter fell off before we could connect her to the larger network. But you can see that a lot of these, like this roost is connected to quite a lot of bats, and same with these roosts over here. So actually this one is a bat house that's next to the park property. And this one's a telephone pole of all places, which is very weird for them to be using man-made structures. And all of these female bats are related to one another. The maternity colonies are formed by female bats who will come from the same colony. So they might give birth to a female bat and she'll return to this colony the next year when she's ready to give birth. So they're all sisters or nieces or aunts of one another, which is really cool. When the colony usually we get too big, then maybe one of the females would break off and start her own colony. But they're all related to one another somehow through the mother's line. Oops. Oh yeah, and these are the two primary node roosts in this network. So far, we know that we have a really significant maternity colony at the William Floyd Estate, that they return every year and they're successfully reproducing. We've caught a couple of juveniles, males and females. Unfortunately, because of the transmitters are too heavy to put on most juveniles, except for that one male was heavy enough that we could put it on him. So we can't track the juveniles usually, but we catch them when we're like late season when we're really lucky. So that's really nice that we have some evidence that they're reproducing successfully and not just maybe the bat we're catching is lactating. And so we assume she's reproduced, but we don't know if the baby's made it or not. So we do have evidence that some of the pups have made it. And that the maternity colony bats are closely related to one another. And the ones that we have in Long Island seem to be pretty closely related to other bats that we have in the mid-Atlantic. And they have really close social connections and tight bonds with one another, whether it's with the entire colony as a whole or their buddy bats that they kind of go off and share these outer trees with. And then I have my thank you slide for my funders and my support. And I have my email down here at the bottom if anybody has any questions too.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Katie. And thank you again, Emily. Those were awesome presentations. We have a little extra time for the Q&A period, which is great because we have a lot of awesome questions in the Q&A box and in the chat. So at this time, we can open the virtual floor up to any questions. And if you haven't done so already, there's still time. You can put in a question in the Q&A box right now. I'm going to start at the top here. Lou would like to know, why can't I get any bats to check into my bat's house? It's been up for 3 years, faces west, painted black, approximately 15 to 18 feet on a tree. No branches near the bat house. Maybe Emily, do you want to try?
Yeah, I can jump in and kind of just start this. So I was looking through some of the questions, and I think we got a few that were related kind of to this topic. So I'll go over a couple things. So when you do put up in a bat house in your yard or property, it is really important to look at the location and the installation of the bat house. Like you said, it seems like you've ticked a lot of the boxes, but I'll just go over some of what they are, just so kind of everyone can know. You want to place it relatively high, so 10 to 12 feet above the ground. You don't really want to place it on a tree, but it's not bad an idea to place it kind of near wooded areas. You might want to place it on a pole or like a building or something like that. And then also a couple other features. They seem to be, from what I've read, most successful when they're kind of near a water source or near kind of a water source area where you might get a lot of insects, because obviously that's where they're going to be hunting. And like you said, you do want them painted a relatively dark color, especially for females, because they're looking for a really warm environment to raise their pups. A couple of reasons why you might not be getting them is, one, we can't really make bats come to bat houses. It's not like birds where you can offer food or something like that. They're very independent wild creatures, and they kind of are going to find where they want to roost best by themselves. And I think if you have a lot of good available habitat around your property, they might just find other preferences like other trees or other areas where they prefer to roost. However, it might be beneficial to move your bat house, try a different location, try a different spot. It may take some trial and error to see if you are going to get any bats. But like I said, you can't guarantee that you'll get bats, but it's a good idea even to have a bat house up, because you might be providing them with an alternate opportunity to roost somewhere else if they don't find one that they prefer. So yeah, Katie, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I think all of that is exactly what I would recommend. Also, sometimes I think bats can take like up to 5 years to find a bat house, so they might need a little time. It could also be that if it's facing west and it's painted black, maybe it's too hot in there for them, so you could try to spin it and have it facing south or southeast instead and see if that helps. Also, I've heard like planting certain flowers to attract like moths and beetles might help attract the bats too. And also the bat house where we found the maternity colony of northern longeared bats, they had it on a pole, and they actually had 2 bat houses back to back. And I thought that was pretty cool, because I think it allows them a little bit more flexibility, and like if they need extra heat or sun on one day, they can go to this side of the bat house, but if they don't need that and they want something a little cooler, they can kind of be in charge of their microclimate a little bit better. So that's a really awesome idea I think that family had. It's kind of like a bat hotel kind of thing. But yeah, I think that and sometimes setting up like a bird bath or something that has water in it for them to drink might attract them too if you're not near other water.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I think between the two of you, you guys answered a lot of the questions regarding the bat house. So that was good. And then I guess just one more about the bat house. You answered part of it, but they want to know if you could recommend a specific kind of bat house that would be best.
Yeah, so I'll I could jump in a little bit here too, just because I know I've been recently looking it up myself. So often, sometimes I find that if you're like building your own bat house and kind of experimenting in that way, sometimes it's easiest to start with the single chambered bat house. However, there is some research that multi-chambered bat houses, so maybe like Katie was saying, that offer more flexibility in kind of the way that they use it, are more successful for bats. So if you look online, even on our website, we offer a lot of different websites where you can buy bat houses, and a lot of these bat house companies offer multi-chambered bat houses, and you can also build your own multi-chambered bat house as well, and we offer some information on how to do that too.
Yeah, and I'll say somebody in my lab is working on researching this too, and his name is Jesse De La Cruz, if you want to look him up, but he is a big proponent of rocket boxes. So I think because they're like also offer the 360 stuff. I don't know how it would be to build them yourself or anything though, or how much it costs.
Great, thank you. And then we have one question here kind of on the flip side. What do you suggest to deter bats from living in outside spaces of a house? We have bat houses around our property, but not sure if they are used.
So I'm a little familiar with, I know that there's certain like devices you can put on your house, whether it's like your attic or certain areas that are kind of exclusion devices. They don't necessarily harm the bats, but they basically like allow the bats to leave a space and they don't allow them to get back in. So they'll need to find like a new home. I'm not quite sure like exactly where they sell these or things like that, but I know that those are definitely available that you can install in your homes. And also like I said too, depending on the situation, we can also kind of put you in touch with some wildlife like rehab or professionals that might be able to look at your home, like if you have a really kind of bad, I won't say infestation, but if there's just a lot using that space, we have some different contacts we might be able to put you in touch with that can look at your space in a little bit more detail. Yeah.
Katie agrees. Awesome. Next up, we have a question from Stephen, and he'd like to know how many babies does an average female produce in their lifetime? Katie, do you want to take that one?
Oh, sure. I haven't done the math, but so different species will have a different amount of pups. Most species will just have one a year, and they're ready to reproduce their first year out of the gate. They're considered adults by pretty much by the fall. There are some species like red bats that usually have twins and stuff, so they actually have more nipples than some of the other bats because they just happen to be that way. But the northern long-eared bats, they usually have about one bat, and then they'll live, so for their size, they live a really long time. Generally, the smaller the animal, the shorter the lifespan, but that's not really the case with bats. So I think there's records of bats living past 20 years old, I think, for like the extreme cases, like because we put the uniquely numbered aluminum bands on their forearms whenever we catch one that we're interested in. So researchers can enter that into like this database and they can see like, oh, this bat was caught 20 years ago or 10 years ago, or for me, it's like, these are the same bats that I caught last year. So I think that usually the average lifespan is anywhere between like 12 and 20 years, but so if they're having 1 to 2 bats a year, depending on the species, it's a lot of potentially a lot of babies. But I think as the females get older too, we don't have a lot of evidence of them necessarily being reproductively active. Like maybe that's when the females kind of go off on their own and they're more solitary.
Awesome, thank you. Bruce said that 2 years running, I have had a bat appear on a warm winter day, late February or very early March. It flutters a bit like a butterfly, and I suspect it was hibernating in leaf litter at the edge of my property. Any thoughts on the species?
Probably a red bat. They hibernate in leaf litter.
All right, there you go, Bruce.
Crazy.
Red bat. Awesome. Next up, Indy is asking, has anyone investigated if WNS can alter the echolocation of a bat? Infected bats could then possibly be identified by your receivers.
I don't think anybody's looked into that yet. I don't know what about white nose would make them alter their echolocation, but it's an interesting question for sure. And the problem with our receivers is that if we get 20 bat calls in an hour, we don't know if it's one bat or if it's 20 bats. There's not really any way to tell individuals from it because the calls are so generalized too. But yeah, I mean, the thing I guess that would affect their echolocation is if they have really bad wing damage, maybe they're echolocating in a slightly different way because they're flying in a different way. But if their wing damage is that severe, odds are they're not gonna really be able to hunt and make it for very long either.
Awesome, thank you. We have a question from Cora, age 4, and she wants to know if bats can see with their eyes or only echolocation.
Yeah, I guess I'll just, bats are not blind, unlike, I know that's kind of a little bit of a pop culture belief, but they're not blind. But since they do use the landscape mostly at night, it is very difficult to see for a lot of people and other animals to see at night. So, I mean, that's primarily like a way echolocation has evolved in that sense. But yeah, I'm sure Katie can add a lot more things on that too.
Yeah, I actually have a really cool anecdote about this, which I don't know if it's getting too deep into the weeds or anything, but I was at a bat netting event last week, and I had a non-bat person ask me if bats have eye shine. So like, if you're looking out in the woods at night and you can see eyes reflecting back at you like deer and raccoons. And I never really thought about that before, but I was like, I shine my light in bats' faces all the time, and I've never seen their eyes reflect back at me. So we did a little research, and there's this, I guess, layer over the eyes of some animals that are active at night, but are not necessarily fully nocturnal, that allows them to, it like reflects more light and allows them to take in more light so that they can see better at night, which bats don't have that. There's only like one species of bat that has that, which is like a fruit bat in Australia. And those bats are active during the day and they don't echolocate. So that makes a lot of sense. But yeah, bats that we have here have pretty much the same eyesight as we do in the dark. So like they can kind of see, but not super well when it's dark. So the echolocation definitely helps. But that's why they'll make use of linear landscape features like roads or rivers to navigate by, because then they don't necessarily have to use up all of their energy echolocating if they're not hunting specifically.
Gotcha. Awesome. Thank you, Cora, for that question. That was a great question. Nancy would like to know, what is delayed fertilization? Katie, I don't know if you want to take that one.
Yeah, it's when, so the bats will kind of get together and do their mating ritual in the fall, but then the females and the males, everybody needs to go into hibernation. So the females, rather than use up precious bodies like fats and energy and stuff on gestating or like growing a baby in them, they will actually not, the egg won't get fertilized until the spring when they emerge from hibernation. And there's some studies that suggest that if they've mated with multiple male bats, they can maybe even choose which sperm fertilizes the egg. So I don't know if that answers the question well enough, but they'll mate in the fall, and then the egg will not become fertilized until the spring, even though they're storing the sperm inside them.
That's so interesting. I did not know that. We have a few questions about Batmap Long Island. So Emily, I'm going to group them together a little bit.
Yeah.
So Kathy said, I've had bats at my house in East Hampton for about 10 years. They have chosen a very high eave that faces east and north, but gets sun early in the day. I think they are little brown bats and also like the closed umbrellas that sit in the sun. Should I post this as a single time or mention the number of years in regards to how she should post it, I believe, in Batmap Long Island?
Sure. So if you have there, yeah, so you can do a couple things. If you have more of a situation like that, where you're kind of just want to submit more of like a record and not necessarily like a one-time observation, the best bet is to probably, you can just email me directly at ehall, EHAL at HALL at seatuck.org. And that might be a little bit easier for me to kind of keep that in the record, because I think for our app, we have it set up so you can really only do it for a distinct point in time. So yeah, if you're trying to or want to let us know of something that's been happening for a longer time, you might have some more anecdotal like information to add, you can probably just email me directly. That'd probably be the easiest way to do it.
Yeah, and I'll provide all of our email addresses at the end of this presentation, so you guys will have that. And then Carla would like to know, do you want only current sightings? So it goes along the same line as the other.
Yeah, so again, you can do the same thing where if it's a little bit easier than trying to finagle it on our app, you could just email me directly. Or if you want to kind of post back a sighting, if you know the estimated date and time, you could just put that into the app itself if you have that information. But if not, and you just kind of want to provide us a record of where you're seeing something or where you're seeing something year over year, feel free to just email me.
Awesome, thank you. And then Carla would also like to know, how does the size of the long ear compare with the little brown bat? And do they only hibernate with their own species, or might they mix in a cave?
They usually hibernate all in one species, but sometimes you'll find a stray. Usually it'll be like a stray big brown that's just kind of like nestled in there with them, and they're really derpy and weird about it. But usually they'll hibernate with just their own species. For the ear, northern long-eared bats, so their tragus is longer and much pointier than little brown bats. But then the ear itself, one of the ways that you would like say, okay, for sure what I have in my hand is a northern long-eared bat, is you take their ear and you like fold it over their face, and their ear will come out past their nose at least 2 millimeters. So there's like really long floppy ears when you push them down over their face, whereas little brown bats, it won't come quite as far down their face. They're a little more stubbier.
Awesome. Stephen would like to know, how specifically can bats help pollinate or create natural pest control in a garden?
Sure. So I'll jump in a little bit. So for one thing, like I was saying, the more pollinating species of bats are located in other parts of the US. So kind of like the South, I think Western US or some different species as well. But those will help pollinate, like I said, support things like avocados, coconuts, agave, things like that. Locally, though, we have those insect-eating bats. So if you do have a healthy bat population in your neighborhood or yard, I think I read someone on the notes say too that they barely have any mosquitoes. So you might see kind of reduced population of mosquitoes in your area, or like I said, sometimes they'll eat other harmful insects that can go after agriculture and things like that as well.
Katie, did you want to add anything to that, or?
No, I think that's pretty much it. I think that big brown bats are pretty notorious for liking some beetle that is a big pest for corn crops in particular, and then in grapes, I think too. So for Long Island, that could be really relevant.
Yeah.
Anne, 2 years ago in late spring, I found bats roosting within the top part of the closed umbrella on the deck. When I opened the umbrella, they left and haven't seen them since. I'm very near water on the edge of a pond and would like to create a secure habitat for them. Is my best bet a bat house, and where should I get one?
Yeah, so your best bet would probably be to install a bat house. Like I was mentioning, if you go on our website, seatuck.org, I think it's just /bats, you'll find we have kind of a host of reputable sites that sell bat houses, really well constructed ones. And like I said, some of those are even multi-chambered bat houses. Or like I said, you can also build your own, and we have some information on how to do that as well. But if you have any additional questions on where to put it or what to buy or things like that, you can email me. But most of that information is really on our website.
Yeah, Emily has a great video of building and how to build a bat house. That'd be nice to follow along and build it. It looked like a lot of fun.
Great time.
So I'm going to combine these two questions because they're kind of asking the same thing. Basically, what should someone do if they want to get rid of bats in their house? Who should they contact?
Yeah, so again, you can just email us, email me at my ehall@seatuck.org email, and I can put you in touch with some folks that might be able to help you. Also, though, like I was mentioning, if you go to our kind of affiliated website, it's called Wildlife Monitoring Network li.org. We have an entire page on there on wildlife rescue contacts, and it's like a really great series of information, and kind of shows you to what different rescue contacts are in your area. So you can go directly to that as well. Not even, it doesn't have to just be for bats, but it can really be for any Long Island wildlife that you might see as being a nuisance or have an issue with, or is dead or injured or something like that. So yeah, that's probably the best ways to do that.
Perfect. And then Carla would like to know, do bats only eat flying insects? Or I guess the bats on Long Island, do they only eat flying insects?
Yeah, Katie,
yeah.
maybe more depth.
The insect
was like
doesn't
harmonized.
The insect doesn't have to be currently in flight for the bat to eat it, but usually like beetles, moths, and mosquitoes are the top three that are eaten by bats. So not like worms or anything.
And I think we have one more question here from Colton. He is 6 years old and he would like to know how the nets catch the bats. How do the nets catch the bats without hurting them? And thank you.
Yeah, so bats are they're actually really, really good at echolocation. They can avoid something as thin as a human hair with their echolocation. However, if they're not looking, like they're on one of these straight line roads and they're just kind of like trying to get from one place to another, or they're looking off to the sides for something to eat, they'll just knock right into it. And they're not caught, so they're like a little loose, so the bat will fly into it and kind of fall into a little basket that the net has. And they're really, really soft. These are the same, or they're like similar to what other researchers will use to catch songbirds and stuff. And songbirds have, really, their feathers need to be very organized, and they've got hollow bones, so they're a lot more fragile than bats. Bats don't have hollow bones. They've got bones like us, and their wings are really delicate, but for the most part, they kind of just fall into the net and kind of curl up a little bit, and sometimes they'll even wait there for you to come get them out. Some bats are a little crankier than others, and they'll kind of flop around, but they won't hurt themselves in it. And then we put them into cloth bags when we take them back to where we're going to measure them and weigh them and everything, so they're kind of contained and they won't hurt themselves. If we feel like, and we check the nets every 10 minutes, so no bat is in there for very long. And we have really strict protocols of how long we're allowed to have a bat in our hands before we release it. So, and if any bat is showing any signs of stress, like they'll curl their tails up really tight, then we immediately let them go. It's not worth injuring them or causing them stress. Well, they're stressed because they're caught. Lethal amounts of stress. It's not worth that for our research at all. So we immediately let them go.
Yeah, and I'll just say too that I've been out with Katie sampling and some other researchers, and they're all like they're very delicate in how they get these bats out of the net. It's a very delicate process, so they make sure that they're not hurting them as they try to get out of the net too. They're great at that.
Awesome, good to know. So it is a little past 7. I believe we hit all the questions in the Q&A and in the chat. So with that, I think we can go ahead and wrap it up.
Yeah.
I just want to take a moment to thank our speakers, Katie and Emily. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your time with us. Thank you to the Peconic Land Trust for having us and putting this together. And finally, thank you all for joining us to learn more about bats on Long Island. If you have any questions that you think of after, or if we didn't get to them for some reason, like I said before, I'm going to put all of our email addresses into the chat now. So I know, Kathy, you want to say some final words, but.
Sure. Yeah. I also want to add my thanks to all of you for all the great information. Really wonderful. I learned a lot, and I know that everybody that was listening really did as well. So really appreciate your time and spending energy just putting the presentations together. So just so everybody in the audience knows, we are recording this. So we'll be posting the recording on our website blog. So if you go to the beconiclandtrust.org and our website, on the upper right corner is our blog. Just click on that, and all the programs we've offered through Zoom all live in the blog. So this one will be added to that, and you can take a look at the other ones, and hopefully you'll find some other topics of interest. If you have any other questions for us about programming, please feel free to reach out to me. My email is kkennedy@beconiclandtrust.org. And with regard to the bat house, we usually do a birdhouse building workshop, which has been a virtual program with a video. So we may be doing bat boxes this year just to shake it up a little. So I'm sure I'll be working with Emily and the gang at Seatuck to try to come up with a nice, easy bat box that we can all create together. So stay tuned for that in our programs. So with that, I just want to say good night. Thanks again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again.